Praise the Lord. We are studying in the book of Revelation and chapter 13. Last week we began this chapter. This chapter talking about the first beast, which in my mind I've always heard him called the Antichrist, and that's what I call him. But it consistently in the book of Revelation he's called the beast. That he's given power by the devil. We see that in verses 2, where it says, at the last part of that verse, it says, and the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. And then in verse 4, it says, and they worshiped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast, who is able to make war with him? And so I see, I want to go over into 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. It says in that verse, or that chapter, in verses 3 and 4, it says, let no man deceive you by any means, for that day, and of course the verse before it says, the day of Christ is at hand. So when it says the day shall not come, that's really talking about the day of Christ. And it says, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. And verses 8 and 9 in that same chapter, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9 says, and then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders. Let me read you verse 10 also, because it says, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. I wanted to add that other verse because deceiving, the devil is a deceiver. That means he's a liar. And unrighteousness, that's his whole kingdom. Last week I said this is talking, chapter 13 in Revelation is talking about the kingdom of darkness and how it starts with Satan, and that we see that at the first part of this chapter, and that he gives power to the beast, which in my mind is the Antichrist. But 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 calls him the man of sin. It calls him the son of perdition. And then in that verse where it says, in verse 8, it says, and then shall that wicked be revealed. I believe that wicked is referring to that Antichrist also. So tonight when we start, we're going to start at verse 11, because we covered up to verse 10 the last week. It says here in Revelation 13:11, it says, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. I'm going to flip over into Revelation 16 and read you verses 13 to 14. It says, and I saw 3 unclean spirits, like frogs, come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. I wanted you to see here that this second beast, where it says another beast is coming up, that is actually the false prophet. We see it in 2 verses. But I want to include verse 14 here. It says, but they are the spirits of devils. So when it says unclean spirits like frogs, these are the spirits of devils. And it says, working miracles which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world to gather them to the battle of the great day of God Almighty. The second time he's called the false prophet is in Revelation 19. And I'll read you verses 19 and 20. It says, and I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army. Him that sits on the horse is Jesus. We see that there in verse 11. I saw heaven open, behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he does judge and make war. The other verse I wanted you to see is there in verse 20, Revelation 19:20. It says, and the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet. So that's two times that this second beast that comes up in Revelation 13 is called the false prophet. So in my mind, I call the first one the Antichrist, although Scripture tells us that there are many Antichrists. And even in Matthew 24 and Mark 13, both of those says that there'll be many false Christs come up, or Antichrist come into the scene. But there is one specifically which Revelation 13 calls the beast, and he will be a focal point during the time of great tribulation. Let me finish reading that verse 20 in Revelation 19. It says, the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire, burning with brimstone. So both the first beast, the Antichrist, and the false prophet go directly into the lake of fire when Jesus comes. When it talks in here in Revelation 13 about this false prophet, that where in verse 11 it says, I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. It reminds me of a passage you see in Matthew 7:15. Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. And that Matthew 7:15 says, beware of false prophets. So there are many false prophets also. We can say there's many antichrists, but there are a lot of false prophets. And so in this verse, in verse 11, I see that he appears as a lamb, but he speaks like a devil. I see that from Revelation 16, where you have those three spirits, evil spirits, devils, that are deceiving people. And in verse 12 here of Revelation 13, it says, and I'm talking about the false prophet, he exercises all the power of the first beast before him, and causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Now, this verse 12, talks about the beast, the Antichrist, having a deadly wound. We see it two other times in this chapter. We saw it in verse 3. It says, I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. We see in verse 14, it says there, and deceived them that dwell on the earth by means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. There's 3 verses in this one chapter that tells us that he had a deadly wound and was healed, right? Once dead, now he's living. And there are 2 verses that tell us that he ascends out of the pit. The pit is not a good place to be. The bottomless pit is a place of judgment. Revelation 11:7, it says, talking about the witnesses, it says, when they shall finish their testimony, the beast that ascends out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them and shall overcome them and kill them. We talked about this last week also, that the first beast, the Antichrist, makes war with the saints and overcomes them. That's in verse 7. It was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. It also says power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. The other verse that talks about him coming out of the bottomless pit is in Revelation 17 and verse 8. It says, the beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. Now remember, 2 Thessalonians 2 calls him the son of perdition. And it says, and they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they beheld the beast that was and is not and yet is. Go ahead.
Is this beast in verse 11 of chapter 13? That's the second beast coming out. And it says all, and then it goes on to 12, it says, and all he exercised power of the first beast before him.
Right.
Is he the same thing as the first beast?
No. These are 2 individuals.
The first beast was killed.
Yes, but he's revived.
And healed.
Healed, right. But another, it says specifically in there, another beast comes up out of the earth. Now, listen to this. The reason why I know that these are 2 individuals is because when we read in Revelation 19 that they are both going into the lake of fire. They're both going in. That's their judgment. And not only that.
Where was that at? 19?
Yes, Revelation 19 and verse 20. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him.
So the second beast is a false prophet?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
The first one is called the Antichrist. He was killed and he was wounded and healed. The second beast is the false prophet.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
I didn't understand that.
And it I think it's pretty clear when you look at chapter 16, where it says, I saw 3 unclean spirits come out of the mouth of the dragon. We've talked about the dragon being the devil. That's the devil. He's right here in the midst of all this turmoil. And the second one is the beast, which I call the Antichrist. Just to be clear as to when you have beast, sometimes you can get confused.
So he's kind of set up like an unholy trinity.
Yes, it is, except for that before we get to the end of this chapter, we're going to have an image. an image is made, and life is given to this image. And so instead of being 3, now you got 4. Okay, we haven't got there yet, but I just be prepared. He is a mimicker, though, because in Christianity we think of, yes, well,
I don't know.
a clone to me would be the exact same thing, but he's mimicking, or acting like,
Okay,
but
but
he's
this is
definitely not the real thing.
Okay. Right.
Clones,
I don't
clones
know
are
much
like,
about clones.
okay, we have Ada, and now we're going to have Ada. They're all Ada, but, because somehow they've cloned you,
Right.
Science does that.
Yeah, they did that with that lamb.
Right.
Dolly.
Right. Okay, we're not going to go there. But see, that's the technology
Yeah.
that we're living in right now. And we'll get to that when we come to the mark of the beast, because I certainly believe.
He made the image. I'm tying this all into like Jesus was the image.
Yes.
The invisible God. So this beast is created in an image of the. He's a faker.
Yeah, but to me, when I see an image, I think of like an idol. And I haven't got there yet.
Life was given to it.
Yes. Let's finish and get to that part, because now we're kind of skipping ahead, and it's like it's all here, but we haven't got there yet. So let me read you verses 13 to 15 here in chapter 13. 13 to 15, it says, and he does great wonders. Now this is still talking about the false prophet, because it said there in verse 12 that he exercises all the power of the first beast before him, and causes the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. That's the false prophet getting people, the dwellers of earth, to worship the beast called the Antichrist. And then when it talks here in verse 13, it's still talking about the false prophet, that he does great wonders, so that he makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And 14 says, and he deceives them that dwell on the earth by means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast. There will be many miracles and wonders which they are going to do, and deceive many by these works, these wonders, miraculous things. And it says, which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. Now the image is of the first beast, or what we call the Antichrist. And in verse, yes. Verse 15, it says, and he had power to give life. Mine has a footnote on that could have been interpreted breath, life. Life is given unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. One thing that comes to my mind is the first commandment. Let me go over to Mark chapter 12, and I'll read you. This is the words of Jesus. Someone had asked him, what's the greatest commandment? And Jesus, in verse 29, Mark 12, 29 and 30, it says, Jesus answered him, the first of all the commandments is, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And verse 30 says, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment. When Moses was getting the 10 commandments, over in Exodus chapter 20, let me read you verses 1 through 5. It says, and God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which has brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. In my mind, when you see, I think alarm bells will be going off in our heads when we see him sit in the temple of God. That's in 2 Thessalonians, that he's sitting in the temple of God, proclaiming that he is God. That's in verse 4 of 2 Thessalonians 2. It says, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. He is a great pretender. All right? He's pretending to be God. Alarm bells should be going off in our heads if we see this man sitting in the temple saying, I'm God. Alarm bells should be going off in our heads if you see an image that is talking, and that he causes, because as we were reading in there, that image has the power to kill. Look at the last part of 15 there, Revelation 13:15. It says, he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. That image is the one that is executing non-worshipers of the image. This all reminds me of Daniel chapter 3, where Nebuchadnezzar made an image. Do you remember that? And it says in that passage there in Daniel 3, I look there and I see verses 14 to 20. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said to them, is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do not you serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if you be ready that at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, you fall down and worship the image which I have made. Well, but if you worship not, you shall be cast the same hour in the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? And verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. 17, if it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. And verse 19, then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Now, you know the rest of the story is that Jesus appeared in the midst of them, and they were delivered. They came out unburned, unsinged, no smell of smoke on them. The Lord delivered them, saved them that day. But I see in Revelation 13 that this image is the real thing. That was the real thing. In Daniel 3, it's like a shadow of things to come. We talk about types and shadows. This is definitely a shadow of that which is to come in Revelation 13. Let me go on and read you verses 16 to 18, the last 3 verses in this chapter 13. It says, and he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. I want you to know, I believe that we're still talking about the image. Because he, in the verse before, he says he causes them all, as many would not worship the image of the beast, should be killed. And then it goes on and it says, and he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, that's all, everybody, nobody's excluded, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. The 17 says, and that no man might buy or sell save that he had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. And verse 18 says, here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. That's 666. That's the number of the beast. Now, when it says the number of man, I think that 6 is the number of man. But when you're talking about the mark of the beast, that's where you get the 666. Now, I want you to see also that this is an opposite, that the beast, there is the mark of the beast, and that is for the worshipers. If you look at verse 8 here in Revelation 13, it says, all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Those are the people that are going to take the mark of the beast. Those are the people that their names are not in the book of life. But when you look at Revelation 14, where you see this 144,000 having their Father's name written in the foreheads, we were just talking about how the dragon and the beast copy the things of God. Well, the true worshipers, the worshipers of the true God, are going to have their Father's name in their forehead. But those that have been deceived and are following after the dragon and the beast and the false prophet and the image, they will all say, oh yes, let's do this. This is a good thing. I haven't lost anybody, have I? I hope not. Verse 17 says, no man might buy or sell save that he had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. This brings to my mind, you know, technology is fast forwarding so quickly. I don't think it takes a computer to keep up with it. And all this is just coming into play since, I believe, like the 1980s. I know they had computers before the 80s, but 80s really brought in personal computers, PCs. I don't know whether you remember that or not, but that's when they became available to everybody. It was just like IBM. IBM was a big company and they made computers, but those computers were really for like the government and large companies, and um, it wasn't for ordinary folks. It wasn't for the home use. It was more for businesses and for legal and well, he was one of them. The Apple guy. And just think about it. Do you remember when barcodes? You know, barcodes are those little lines that you see on everything that you buy. It says when you go to the grocery store, they scan them, and of course they ring up your purchase. But in a sense, they're keeping track of what is sold that way. And
I don't understand. I mean, technology is way out, but they do have the ability, well, no, to track us. I mean, like your phone. When I walk into Walmart, if I walk in there, well, Walmart ads start popping up on my phone. But this person came to my house yesterday and took me out and showed me his car. He has that camera in his, which the new cars have now. Instead of on the backside where you can see the rear of your car where you're backing, well, he has a camera in the front that shows all the front too. But it not only shows that, it shows the top of his car wherever he's traveling. It showed from the top of his car, him sitting in my drive, and you could see out the front of it.
In my mind, I was thinking, we don't intend to take the mark of the beast, right? We're not going to take it in our hand or in our forehead. But the thing is that if you are carrying a phone or you're in one of these new cars, you are very available to be found at any moment.
Recognition, they've got everything, every piece of data about you is tracked and recorded. It remembers more about you and what you've done than you even know yourself.
Exactly. I don't know whether, well, never mind. We have our cards, and the cards are chip enabled, right?
Right.
And so you know that technology has been around for several years now. And
it's getting bigger. And this is what Fancy went over and was saying about these chips in Taiwan.
Who did that? Okay.
And her son. They went and had business. Anyway.
Oh, okay.
I just, never mind.
All right. This technology that we're talking about here is come about since, I want to say, the 80s and perhaps before, but in these last years, it is really fast forwarding, advancing beyond comprehension, beyond my comprehension. I'm not talking about you. I'm pointing the finger at me saying, but I want you to, I'm looking at Revelation 14, and I want to read you verses 9 through 11. Many people are going to think, oh, yes, this is a wonderful thing. That's the deceivableness of it, is that you don't have to carry cash. They really want to get us to that point where we are totally cashless, and you are just going to live off your card. So easy,
Carry cash, they just carry a card.
I want you to realize something here in Revelation 14 and verse 9. It says, the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast and his image and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same, this is verse 10, shall drink the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. Verse 11, listen to this. A lot of people think, oh, this is a good thing. But it says, the smoke of their torment ascends up forever and ever, and they have no rest, day nor night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receives the mark of his name. Do you see that? There is no saving someone that takes the mark of the beast. They are going into the lake of fire. And there is no short term on that. It is forever and ever. It says that in verse 11. They have no rest, day nor night. That is the most terrible thing I could ever imagine. Now, in verse 18, where we talked about the number of the beast, it said, it is the number of man, and his number is 666. This verse 11 says, whosoever receives the mark of his name. Now, when we get into Revelation 14, we're going to talk about the servants of God having their Father's name in their forehead, right? But remember this mark of the beast, that's the number of his name. His name.